A very good evening from India and a warm welcome to the fifth episode of Let's Talk Inclusion. I'm Chakraborty, an inclusive education consultant based in India, and my guests today are Ms. Sheridan Steen from the UK, Ms. Blessing Ingyape from Nigeria, and Ms. Archana Garg from India. Hello, Sheridan. Hi, Blessing. Hi, Archana.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hi, Manobina. Nice to meet you all.
Same here. So we hope to have a wholesome discussion about finding support for a child with specific learning difficulty today, because we have in our panel today a school search consultant, a vastly experienced teacher, and a psychologist. So before we start today's discussion, may I request the experts to tell us something about lives and work, please? Sheridan, could you start, please?
Yes, I'd be very pleased to. Good afternoon, everybody from the UK. Right, Dyslexia School Search, which I founded just under 10 years ago because I have a very dyslexic daughter and I was I was struggling to find a school that could support her. And I knew there were good schools here in the UK, and I also knew that there were some schools that were possibly promising that they could do all sorts of things for children with dyslexia or learning difficulties who I felt were possibly being not quite as honest as they might be about the kind of support that they could give. And so that was the reason why I set out on the journey, was because we'd struggled to find a school for my own daughter. And 10 years later, I'm still helping families from around the world. We have some extremely good schools here that can accommodate children with the mildest of learning difficulties to those children whose profiles are really very profound. And it's a great pleasure to work with their families, as well as all the professionals that go to make the journey a possible outcome for the children.
Amazing, Sheridan. Thank you very much for taking out some time for our show today. And we would love to know about your journey with Dyslexia School Search.
Okay.
Now on to my dear friend Blessing, who is one of the founding members of I for Inclusion. Blessing, could you please tell our viewers more about yourself?
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Blessing Ingyape, and I'm connecting with you today from Nigeria, Abuja, Nigeria. And I'm the founder of Dyslexia Help Africa. I am a certified special needs teacher. And I founded Dyslexia Help Africa because of the passion I have for children with dyslexia. It actually started when I was in grade school. I always wondered why some of my friends or peers had to fail. You know, so, in some of the educational systems here in Nigeria, what happens is that if you fail a particular class, you're asked to repeat that grade. So I often wondered why they had to fail. Some had to even drop out of school because they couldn't learn how to read, and all of the abuses and all of the trauma, people telling them school is not for you, so just drop out. So when I went into the university and studied special education, and then after that got more training, and then I got stuck with dyslexia. When we got to that part of dyslexia, I got stuck there because for the first time I could understand why my friends, that was about 15 years ago, back in school then, were always failing or why they couldn't read. I was like, oh, so this is what was happening to them. And it is so sad that none of our teachers understood what was happening. These kids were said to be dumb, to be lazy. So for the first time, knowing what dyslexia was, understanding what dyslexia was or what dyslexia is, I told myself that, you know what, Blessing, you might not be able to go back and help your friends and your peers back 15 years down the lane. But right now where you are, you can help lots and lots of African kids that are going through this trauma and teachers who don't know how to help them. So that's what gave birth to Dyslexia Help Africa. And we've been doing an amazing work here in Nigeria. and in Africa as a whole to educate parents and teachers and to also offer intervention for children with dyslexia. Thank you for having me here, Manobina.
Thank you, Blessing. Glad you are here today. Archana again is our collaborator in iPod Inclusion and, of course, a dear colleague of mine in Saaransh Foundation, India. Archana, may I request you to say something about yourself, please?
Yeah. Hello, I am Archana Garg, a clinical psychologist with specialization in child rehabilitation. And I have been working in this field in different parts of India for almost 2 decades now. And as Manobina just mentioned, I have been working with her very closely in Saaransh Foundation in Gujarat. And it's in India for the last 5 years almost. And if I talk about Saaransh, it is an independent unit which is catering to the needs of differently able children. And it's within the campus of a mainstream school. And I am one of the core team members there. And now I feel very happy and lucky that I am part of iPhone Inclusion.
Thank you, Archana. Glad you are here today.
Thank you, Manobina.
So let's come to the topic of discussion today, and that is finding support for a child with SpLD, that is specific learning difficulties. As per my understanding, friends, please correct me if I'm wrong, SpLD or specific learning difficulties affect the way information is learned and processed. They are neurological rather than psychological, usually run in families and occur independently of intelligence. They can have significant impact on education and learning and on the acquisition of literacy skills. Is that right? Yes. So SpLD is an umbrella term used to cover a range of frequently co-occurring difficulties like dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, attention deficit disorder, that is ADD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, that is ADHD. Sheridan, you have been working in this field for quite some time now. So could you please tell us what is the first thing parents must do when their child is diagnosed with a specific learning difficulty?
Absolutely. Well, it's one of the part of my journey, so I'm going to refer a little bit to my journey, was my daughter is now quite old. So she's 30, probably the same age as Blessing, two of your people. And when we felt as parents that there was something going on in her profile, a lot of the teachers would say, no, don't worry, she will catch up. Children learn at different speeds. But my husband's family have a long line of dyslexia running through their genes. And eventually, at the age of 10, I managed to persuade somebody to agree to carry out an EdPsych report, an educational psychology report. It took that length of time. Thank goodness things have changed now. And it's around about 6, 7, 8 is a good time to have your child tested, assessed to see whether they have got a specific learning difficulty. In fact, they can be assessed earlier than that if it's going to be something around ADHD, ASD. But for dyslexia, it can be a little bit difficult to make that assessment. So once the family have got a good report, and that's really important, to get a good clinical or educational psychologist report carried out. Again, you can have, unfortunately, sometimes the reports that I see are not particularly helpful. And that's from all over the world. Sometimes you get a report from Germany or Italy or whatever, which may only be 1 or 2 pages and really consists of the WISC report and nothing very much more than that. And that's really not particularly helpful. So from our point of view, if we see a report that we don't feel is really very helpful, then I will try and organise for a child to have a further assessment. But that can be problematic if their language, English is not their first language. So it's undoing to do, and then to be able to get a picture of what a child's profile is. And then I have to turn to my support, my educational psychologist or my speech and language or my occupational therapist, to take a look at the report and give me their picture of that child from reading this hopefully very good report. And once I've got that report, then we then can see what level of need that child has, and also to give some encouragement to the parents, because often a parent will look at a report and sometimes the reports are written in such a way that the parents really don't understand what is being written, and they panic and they think this is a disaster. And 3 o'clock in the morning is a very, very bad time to be awake worrying about your child's profile. So my journey is to look at the child, to get my experts to look at the child, and then to say, yeah, okay, well, this is where this child has really good strengths. This is where the child, you know, at the moment I'm working with a little girl who's got dyscalculia, and dyscalculia is the hardest, in my view, almost the hardest dys to help with, because there are not that many, I don't think, really expert teachers in dyscalculia. It seems it's a really hard area. But for dyslexia, there are so many interventions, and it's getting to understand how to teach that child. They each learn in a different way. So I'm losing the track slightly of how to respond, but it's really to understand we need to have a really good report. And from that way, then I'm looking for the talents of that child, because every child has a talent, and it's trying to say, okay, your son or your daughter might be fantastically good, actually, they might be dyslexic, but they're very potentially good mathematicians or physicists. So let's concentrate on schools where that support is there and an understanding of dyslexia. So it's a balance. It's finding their talents so that you can keep their self-confidence going or rebuild it, because often children come to me with their confidence on the ground, and their parents have also lost confidence in their children's ability as well, or worry. They know that they've got some, you know, every child is precious, but it's a matter of understanding that they can do really well.
So you have some schools in the UK, the schools, those have the provisions of accommodate a child with a learning difference in a mainstream classroom. And yes, the scenario is quite different.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm really thrilled that we have such a wide range of schools. So even the top schools, if you like, the Etons and etc., have now invested in really good teaching provision for children who have got a learning difficulty. Obviously, those schools are very selective. Some of the schools are very, very selective. So I have to be selective as well. So when I'm looking at a child's profile, one works out you don't want to necessarily put a child into an atmosphere where they're going to be overwhelmed and feel that they're not achieving. So it's a matter of working out if a child, especially a child, if you've got a child with ASD or attention, ADHD, etc., they may be absolutely fine if their medication, if they're on medication, if their medication is worked out and is properly targeted for them, it can be life transforming, and there's no reason why they can't do well. But you know, some children's profiles are very, very complex, and it won't just be dyslexia, it will be ADHD, it will be ASD as well, and it will be dysgraphia, and so my journey is to make sure that they're in the right schools, and we have such a wide spectrum of schools, and a really good understanding of what is available to help.
So you have a particular process for a school search, right? And what is that process? You have some schools, maybe those schools cater to the needs of ASD children, or maybe there are some schools where the teachers are trained to cater to the needs of children with dyslexia. So
Yeah.
is it something like that? I also in the UK though, and I worked in a mainstream school, autism unit of mainstream school about 10 years ago. So I know about the fact that there are trained teachers available in the schools in the UK. So what is your process of searching schools?
Yes, okay, right. Well, as you know, having worked here, it does vary from area to area, and I work solely within the independent school sector, not the state system, because, and I'm not saying that the state system doesn't work, but there's so much support in so many schools, and it does vary, and I can't have the knowledge about what is available in every single school. So the schools that I work with are within the independent sector, and
Okay.
they are, a majority of them are mainstream, because, as I said earlier, I believe that what we need to do is look for the child's talents. And in the mainstream schools, they have the facilities to either allow a child who may be a fantastic artist or a very good designer, or got the potential to want to do architecture, etc., to have teachers who are expert teachers in their subject, sitting alongside a very, very good team of learning support teachers who are in the SEN department. And I've got sort of work with schools where there may be actually 15 members of staff in the learning support department, not all working full time, but who will be brought in to work with a particular child, or the school will bring in a speech and language therapist to work with, or an OT to work alongside the SENCO. So it's coordinating. For the majority of the time, the children will be in a mainstream class, sitting with their peer group, and then either taken out of, let's say, French, because for many of these children, doing modern foreign languages can be a really difficult area. So again, my daughter struggled with French and Spanish. The school said, right, she doesn't need to do those subjects. We'll use those lesson times for her to have learning support. So she was able to not miss out on any subjects that she really wanted to be involved in and was good at, but was allowed to drop the modern foreign languages.
Okay. I think there is a connectivity issue and at Blessing's end. So I had a question for Blessing now, but let's go to Archana first. Okay. Thank you, Sheridan, for your views. And what I have gathered from Sheridan's talk and the journey, that specific learning difficulties like dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, she gave more stress on, are can make it very difficult and sometimes impossible for a child to achieve the same result as his or her peers in a traditional classroom setting. Some children face a constant struggle with reading and writing, and many are at risk for developing low self-esteem, particularly when their condition goes undiagnosed or unattended. And exactly here, I have a question for Archana. Blessing, I will come back to you since you got disconnected. I am here with Archana now, and I will come back to you soon. So, Archana, how do you, as a psychologist, help children rebuild their self-esteem in this kind of situations?
Okay. Being a psychologist, I do assessment many times, and when I reach to the conclusion, I am supposed to tell that particular child is having autism or mild, he's having mild IQ or having some particular learning difficulty. But I personally never believe in tagging a child or naming a problem. I always work on the child's strength and make the child feel special in positive way. And I strongly believe that it can dramatically improve a child's resilience and his abilities to bounce back from the adversity. So for that, I always advise parents to show their child that they value them as they are. And I also ask parents to spend some quality time or special time with their children, and especially when their phones should be switched off, and the parents are actively engaged in something that child enjoys.
Yes, Archana, being your colleague in Saaransh Foundation, I know what a fantastic job you are doing. Yes,
Thank you, Manobina. Thank you.
a positive attitude and plenty of encouragement from parents and teachers can do wonders when it comes to inspiring these children to stay motivated and persevere. So imagine the frustration you might feel if you spend all night studying for an exam and still receive a poor grade despite your best efforts. In the case of a child with dyslexia, you know better than me, he or she might spell the word correctly one day and incorrectly the next. Dysgraphia can make it painful to hold a pen or pencil and even writing a short paragraph by hand. Uh, it may be a challenge, it may be a very big challenge. So, Blessing, let me come to you now. So, is there any school in Nigeria, like Sheridan was sharing that there are schools, good schools in the UK, the schools that have provisions to accommodate children with a learning difference. So, do you have mainstream schools with this kind of special provisions or the kind of resources or infrastructure to battle with these challenges?
Okay, so here in Nigeria, for most private school, they run the mainstream program where they are able to incorporate children with learning difficulties. Like what Dyslexia Help Africa does for some kids is that we also offer classroom support for kids who are in mainstream. And then we also have some private schools who also have specialists, certified specialist teachers or dyslexia specialists in those schools who also take out the time to help children with dyslexia. But it's just that the ratio is really small. I mean, I'm talking about private schools. When you come to public schools, there is really no provision at all for children with learning difficulties. No provision
What is
at all.
what is the
Okay.
normal strength in a regular classroom, regular
Okay,
mainstream?
Okay, when you talk about education in Nigeria, you're talking about the private education and you're talking about the public education. So the public education owned by the government, of course, and then the private education owned by the people. And the difference is always
Same here,
clear
same in India.
because so the ratio for the public education in a regular classroom, you're talking about 50 to 70 children with just a teacher. Now, when you talk about the public schools, now when you come down to the private schools, that's where you have 10 teachers and 10 students to two teachers, or 15 kids to two teachers, and then a specialist teacher that gets to pull them out once in a while to offer intervention. So you can see
In
that
India,
there is a big dividing line.
Blessing in
Mhm.
India, in public schools, government-run schools, the teacher-student ratio maybe 1 is to 50 or 60, and in the
1 is to
private,
60. Mm-hmm. And the
Private,
private, 1 to 10?
no, it isn't. It is 1 is to
Wow.
30 to 45
Wow.
and that.
Wow, all right.
It is
Well,
a huge
I must
population.
commend most private schools here.
And when
I
I was
must.
in the UK, I found in a classroom, mainstream classroom, mostly the teacher-student ratio is 1 is to 20 with 2 teaching assistants as well. What do you think, Sheridan? Is it like that?
Yes, I was going to say in the independent sector, i.e. the private education, it can be down to averaging in the GCSE years, probably 1 to 10, 1 to 15 teachers with maybe a TA, teaching
Okay.
assistant in the classroom. And what we also will be doing is having one-to-one lessons at least 2 or 3 times a week, maybe more than that. Or what I really like is a combination where the child with dyslexia or a learning difficulty will actually also be group taught, will maybe one teacher to 2, 3, 4 children, so that they also don't feel as if they're the odd one out. So they're not, that there are other children who have the same kind of profile. So the schools will match the children so that they can debate, they can discuss, they feel as if they're in a normal classroom environment, even if it might be slightly smaller. So it's very important, I think, to be able to combine one-to-one and group lessons, and
Yes.
then be also part of the larger lessons for, let's say, geography or history. Or today I've got one little girl who's turning out to be from Hong Kong, and she's turning out to be really good at Latin. Now, nobody expected that, but she's got a very mathematical mind, and Latin plays, it's a language, but it plays to the mathematical mind, and she is a dyslexic, so it's a very interesting profile. But one of the things that I try and encourage my parents to consider, and it's a big step for parents, is to send their children as young as they can face it themselves as parents. It's very difficult to sort of think that you're sending your 9 or 10-year-old away to a boarding school environment. But the sooner the interventions can be put in place and the sooner that they can be taught the tricks, the better the outcome can be. And when I'm faced with a child who may be 16 or 17, whose self-confidence has just been destroyed, it's a really hard uphill struggle for them.
Nice. Okay, thank you, Sheridan, for sharing your experiences. So let's come to Blessing again. So yes, Blessing, we're talking about the school system in Nigeria.
Yes. So I was saying that there's a very big line between the private schools and the public schools. So you have a situation whereby in the public school there is no provision at all for children with special needs, not to even talk of children with dyslexia. But then most private schools have specialists or open their doors to other specialists, like what our center does, offering support for children where the schools are mainstreamed. But even with that, the percentage of schools is not even that high. You know, you have a few private schools who are opening their doors to special education, having sense centers, mainstreaming, and all of that. So there's quite a big line between the private and the public. The private, on the other hand, they try their best to ensure that kids with special needs are included. But then when it comes to public school, there is no inclusion at all for children with dyslexia, no mainstreaming.
Okay. And Blessing, I was watching your show on social media the other day, where you emphasized on the fact that no child is a lost cause. So could you share some of your views on this with us, please?
Okay, I believe that every child can learn. Yeah, like my t-shirt says, is a message I love to carry around the world, not just in Africa, that there is no limit. Every child can learn. And this is so true because, like I was saying earlier when I was introducing myself, there are some kids that I know then who are now like my age mates had to drop out of school because they were told school is not for them. You can't read, you can't learn how to read. So go and learn a trade. But that is not true. No child is a lost cause. There is no child that can't learn how to read. What I've come to realize over time is that the problem is not even with the kids, the problem is with the teachers. And a perfect example is an example of a child I'm currently tutoring who is dyslexic. When the parent reached out to us to help, the mom was like, my son doesn't like to go to school. My son literally says, I hate school. Like every morning when they have to go to school, he says it, I hate school. So when we're to start an intervention, she was very concerned that probably the child might not pay attention. But what happened was that, first of all, we had to figure out what he likes. And we got to realize that one, he's a kinesthetic learner. It's not someone who wants to sit down on a chair with a desk all day long. And then he loves cars. And these two things combined together, we use for his learning resources, his materials to learn. And the first day when we spent about an hour with him, when we're finally done, he was like, are we done? I'm like, yes, we're done. And he's like, but I still want to learn. I'm like, sorry, but we are done. Our class is just for 1 hour. And the mom was surprised that, wait, my son says he wants to still learn, that this has never happened. And you can see that it was not the child's problem that he was failing in school or wasn't progressing in school. It was a problem of the instruction or how the materials or the lessons were conveyed to them. So there is no child that is a lost cause. There is no child that should totally forget about education, forget about learning how to read. We have dyslexic people who are doing amazing things. We have dyslexic people who are authors. And like I always tell them, I have some of them as my friends, one of them, Angela, one of them, Pio. And I always say, come on, you are dyslexic and you have written a book. I am not dyslexic and I don't even have a book to my name. I mean, that tells you the amazing things that people can do when they are given the right environment to flourish. And one of the reasons why I also believe this was 5 years back when I started teaching. The first child I taught was about 7 years old and was severely dyslexic. And I think that was the first major challenge I was facing. That was the first child that gave me the most challenge. Why? Because we had to learn the letter A for over 3 months. And for a while, it was looking like, wait, this child can learn. And people would ask me that, wait, you're teaching her letter A for 3 months. How many years is it going to take for her to learn all the letters of the alphabet? But then the good thing is that we all know that the more you offer intervention, the more the kids learn. It took her about 3 months to learn the letter A, but then less month to learn the other letters. And as we kept progressing, she didn't have to spend so much time learning the same thing. And right now, 4 years later, that child is reading on his grade level. So truly, when you look at all of these experiences, there is no child that is a lost cause. There is no child that doesn't have a purpose. There is no child that can't learn. It is not a student problem. It has always been a teacher problem. And as educators, we have to find ways to reach these kids, find ways to teach them, and find ways to ensure that they achieve everything they want to achieve in this life. No child is a lost cause, and there is no limit. Every child can learn. Every child can learn.
So nicely explained, Blessing. Thank
you.
Can I add something just there, because Blessing touched on something that's really dear to my heart. When I first started the organisation, a mum rang me up from Germany in floods of tears, and she'd just been told that her son was he was 15 and he was retarded, and that was a word that was used to this poor lady. And I was really very anxious how I could possibly help. and he came with a doctor's report, which was 1 page long. Turned out one of my educational psychologists did do an assessment because he'd learned English, to speak English in 1 year fluently. So one knew you had a talented child. He was amazing. We found he had an extraordinary audio memory. So the school that he went to, I found a school that would take him. They put everything onto audio for him, absolutely everything. And within 18 months, he achieved 8 GCSE results. He also set up a manufacturing business. He managed to, he was into drones. He's gone on and he's at Oxford now studying. And his country had wasted his talent. That's what makes me so, so cross. These children are so talented, so many of them. And there could be lost. We need people. We need these children who think out of the box to be properly educated, because the world is in a bit of a mess at the moment, and it's these children who perhaps will find the solutions to our problems. So I'm just stop. It's really, really important that these children are recognised, and that's what does thrill me about schools here in the UK. There are so many of them now that I've been evangelising for a long time, and schools see that they need children like this particular boy. He is a star, and he will. We have Richard Branson. We have these amazing people, and countries who do not teach their children, their dyslexic kids or their kids with ADHD or ASD, should really look very carefully. I know it's very difficult and it can be expensive, but they are such a valuable commodity, if you like. It's horrible to think of a person as being a commodity, but it's really important.
It is. And okay, let me add, just like she said, she said something about educating children who think outside the box. And I've always said that the problem is when you talk to teachers, the problem is these kids who have dyslexia think outside the box. Therefore, regular teaching methods don't work for them. They need methods that are outside the box. They don't want boring methods because of the way their creative brain is. So when you're now putting them through boring routines and boring teaching methods, they're going to blank out because of the way their brain is formed, because of that creative part that is alert. So they need out-of-the-box methods, and they need teachers who teach outside the box.
So true and so nicely explained. Blessings and Sheridan. Thank you very much for that. Now let's come to the psychologist, Archana. What is a psychologist's point of view? So please tell us, what do you think about it?
I also feel the same way, Manobina, almost. And as I always emphasize on rehabilitation, so boosting the self-esteem part in every situation is equally same. And now I would like to share with everybody here today the 5 key points to boost self-esteem for kids that we keep reminding to parents at every parent-teacher meeting in our school. And I think they will benefit to parents and the viewers also. The first one, actually, I have already shared. It's to make the field child special. Okay, it contributes good help to the child's to boost their self-esteem. And if I talk about the number 2, that is teach problem-solving skills. As we know, nothing fosters self-confidence like developing good problem-solving abilities. So help a child to come up with the coping strategies for dealing with their daily struggles and dilemmas. And ask your child what they think would help for the particular problem. And try to come up with the specific or workable solutions that fit to child's personality. And third one is it can be a reinforcing strengths. It is very easy for the children struggling in school to forget that they have strengths. So make a list of all the things that child does well and post it in a place where you both can see it often. and always try to find out the ways to highlight all these things. Number 4 is be realistic, okay, and understand what your child can reasonably accomplish. Accept the problem, as we all know that children take their emotional cues from the adults around them, and if you can accept it, then it is acceptable for them also. And if I talk about the fifth one, that is have them contribute. This is one of the most effective ways to improve self-worth and motivation, is to send that message that they have something of value to offer and that can change the lives of others also. So give your child jobs at home to encourage the sense of responsibility and accomplishment. And you can also help your child to find out the ways to volunteer in the community.
That's very true.
Very true. Yes, Sheridan, you just wanted to say something.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realise I left myself unmuted. No, you're absolutely right about this. It is so important that the child feels valued, that the child feels valued by their peer group. That's really, really important, that they're wanted, that they're not the one that's in the corner being ignored. And also that the parents don't put too much pressure. It's when I'm starting, when you go back to the first question you asked me about the process, I asked my parents to write what we call, I don't know if you know this expression, a warts and all description of their child. So really sit down and honestly look at their child and write all the lovely things about their child, and also where there are problems, so that the parents, it's quite a cathartic journey that the parents have to go on to look at their child and then to appreciate where their child has really got outstanding strengths. And it's sometimes for parents it can be very difficult because the child's learning difficulties might be way beyond dyslexia. I mean, often I find if I have a child who is what I almost call a true dyslexic these days, it's my heart sings, because there's so many ways to help a dyslexic child in this modern time. We have all the assistive technologies that we should be utilizing. And going back to the boy who had everything put onto audio for him, and he was able to dictate his answers. He still now at Oxford doesn't write. He can use assistive technology and readers and scribes, and he has done so to get him through his exam process and all his studying. So it's educating the parents what their child can do, and saying to the child, look, you're the best cricketer, or you're a fantastic rock climber, or whatever it might be, or a team leader. A lot of these children actually, their peer group really embrace them. If for my daughter, she was embraced by her peers, and although academically she was way behind them, at 10 she wasn't reading and writing, and but her personality saw her through, and her encouragement of other people who were struggling. So it's finding that strength of that child and building on that is crucial, and to build up confidence basically is king. And if a child has the confidence to believe in themselves, that's quite a big part of the journey. There's a little girl recently I'm working with, and she actually eventually the other day said to her teacher, can I speak to my class and tell them that I'm dyslexic? And so she stood, she's only 8, 9, and she stood up in front of her class of 25 children and said, you might wonder why I find it a bit difficult to read, and this is why. And she explained what dyslexia was about. And it's been such a cathartic journey for her. And I'm really, really proud of what she's doing. And I'm really proud of the school for encouraging her to do it. It's been amazing. So sorry, I'll mute myself again.
Manobina, unmute yourself,
I
please.
can't hear you. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I muted myself. Thank you very much, Sheridan, for sharing your experience with us. And we are almost at the end of our show today. So before we conclude, any concluding remark for our viewers' blessing?
Yes, please don't forget there are no limits. Every child can learn. Every child can learn. And there are lots of accommodations. I mean, we have audiobooks and we also have, like I love to say, now a child might not be able to read yet, but there are other amazing things they can do. So while we go through the intervention, while we try to get them to read, don't forget that there are other super amazing things about them. Maybe they love sports, they love art. Ensure that aside the intervention time, they also have the time to do something that they are very good at. And just like Archana said, doing things like that will help boost their self-esteem because for once they are doing something they are good at and not something they are struggling with. Those are my last words for today.
Thank you so much, Blessing. And Archana, would you like to give some concluding advice or suggestions to our viewers?
Yeah, sure, Manubina. My advice is for parents and the caretakers. And I want to tell them that they should be very calm and positive, and they should empower themselves with the latest research-based techniques to help the child learn better. And please keep saying to your child these three lines on regular basis. I love you, I trust you, and I am always with you. It helps a
So
lot.
nice. So nice. Thank you very much, Archana. Sheridan, coming to you for your concluding remarks, please.
I can't say very much more than those two lovely ladies because they're absolutely right. The parents must take courage and believe in their children and encourage their children to fulfill their dreams and to follow it. It's tough. It is tough. It's going to be hard sometimes. But remember, I think it's a third of the millionaires or billionaires in the United States are actually dyslexic. So we come back to the fact out of the box thinkers. They are our future.
Thank you very much, Sheridan, Blessing, and Archana. And thanks a
Thank you,
lot
Manobina.
for taking out some time for our viewers just before the Christmas. And I wish all of you a very Merry Christmas and a happy 2021 in advance.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you. I
Same to
wish you the
you.
same.
Happy
Thank you for
Christmas.
having us.
Thank
Merry
you.
Thank you.
Christmas,
And
Thank
Acharna.
you.
Merry
Thank
Christmas,
you.
Sheridan.
Thank you, beautiful ladies.
Bye bye.
And for our
All right.
viewers, we will come back with a brand new episode of Let's Talk Inclusion in the new year. So please keep an eye on our page for further announcements and see you next year. Till then, goodbye and Merry Christmas.
Happy Christmas.
Merry
Bye.
Christmas.
Merry
Bye.
Christmas and
Bye
a
bye.
happy 2021.
Yes.
Bye.